was going to do, so that's given us a bit of leeway. Sometimes there's serendipity, isn't there? Things are meant to be. Let's have a competition. Who's come the furthest of the audience? Any advance on Newtown, Welshpool? Yeah? Talford, Whitchurch? Oh, even further? No. Ironbridge. Any further than Ironbridge? Yeah. Anybody go any further than Ironbridge? Buckinghamshire. I think you win. There's no prize, but you can take home that accolade. You travelled the furthest.
Right, we're just going to check the focus and then we're ready to go.
It can be as out of focus as you like. Might be an advantage. Never been surrounded by so much tech in all my life. I don't understand any of it, so it's great that we've got Matt to do it for us today. Yeah, most people know. Yeah, I'm gonna do it, yeah.
Okay, you ready to go?
Brilliant. Yes, I am. Thank you.
You're going to start there.
Mhm.
3, 2, 1, live.
Hello everybody, my name is Pat Edwards. I'm also a poet, but you won't be hearing any poetry from me today. Welcome, I'm delighted to see proper real live people and you're not in little boxes on a Zoom. So fantastic, thank you so much for turning up to Mid Wales Arts Centre here in Caersus. And we've already established where some of you have travelled from. Today we're live streaming, so I don't know if I'm speaking to 2 people or 22 people or 200 people, and they could be anywhere in the country or beyond. But I know that there are some people who are watching this from the comfort of their own homes. So thank you to them as well. You probably realised we're adhering to COVID security, so many of you will have seen the sanitising for your hands. And those of you that are in bubbles are able to sit closer together and keep 2 metres apart. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. It's not going to stop us having a fantastic afternoon. I'm very grateful to Matt, who set up all the tech for the live streaming. And thanks also to Jeb, who's a musician who's going to be performing at 4 o'clock in the music event. Are any of you staying for that? Some of you stay? Yeah, great. So you're doing a whole afternoon of joy. Well done you. So thanks to him. And of course, thanks to Kathy and John, who are the owners and proprietors of this fantastic facility. And isn't it great that we've got this kind of halfway house? It's almost like being outside because it's so light and airy, and yet we feel that we can be well spaced apart. So it's a nice kind of halfway point for when we hopefully can return to doing things as we did before. We've got a tight schedule, but as I said, we're missing Ben Gwalchmai today due to his personal circumstances, so it's given us a little bit of leeway, but I am going to get on because the music event starts at 4. I know the poets are all seasoned professionals, so they're going to stick to their timings of what I've asked them to do. So our first poet today who's going to read for us is Chris Kinsey. She doesn't need an introduction for quite a few of you because she's our most local poet from Newtown, just along the road there, about 20 minutes away. Less than that, probably. I'm going to read from my notes here. So Chris's writings are rooted in the landscape and people of the Mid Wales borders. She was BBC Wildlife Poet of the Year and won Natur Cymru's prose competition in 2012. Chris has published poetry collections Kung Fu Lullabies and Cure for a Crooked Smile with Ragged Raven Press, and Swarf with Smokestack Books, Muddy Fox Rack Press, and her most recent From Rowan Ridge with Fairacre Press last year. She's also written short dramas and was a reviewer for Envoy, New Welsh Review and Planet. I have the very great privilege of introducing Chris Kinsey.
Well, thank you very much, Pat, for welcoming me and inviting me, and hooray to all of you for coming out. I've been very careful during COVID. I'm living with someone who's shielding, so if I seem a bit standoffish, that's the reason why. I planned my set very carefully this morning, and I've gone and left it under a cushion at home. So I'm going to start with this poem because it's that time of year when I like to rescue spiders, benign eviction of spiders from baths and sinks to down by the skirting board. I think spiders actually helped me to accept school and learning. I've never really liked captivity, whether it's school or work. So this year's been great for me in that respect, to stay at home. It's called Silk Roads. Spiders showed her the ropes. Without them, she might have refused school. She prowled along pavements. Only her face could feel ghost silks. Her 4-year-old fingertips touched and tapped. Doubt, doubt, doubt. She tongued her way down alleys, found that gossamer had less savour than stray hair or dandelion down. Where did the threads come from? Why weren't they there at home time? What snared, strained and snapped? Her cheeks felt the physics of curiosity, eyelashes brushing breaking point. Dew made orbs apparent, mystery condensed, then rhyme. She squandered crystal fortunes to enchantment. Stuck on sums, she stared at cobwebs crazing the window pane and saw the spider spin her drag lines, drop lines, guidelines, and regretted all her breaches of web. She learned to limber under silk tightropes. A tremble of tensions triggers spiders to abseil. Swathe the trapped housefly with gauze. It's now just a barrel to tap over days. Every time it sums, she watches spiders drift and wonders, if she were better at handstands, would she develop spinnerets like a money spider? She wants to cast a thread to the wind and kite free of classroom captivity. Sometimes she's sent for and catches the spider holding class 7 hostage. She sets it on toad flax, takes the long way back. That was one of my favourite things at school, was be especially called out of mental arithmetic by the teacher who had what was called then the remedial class, because she was terrified of spiders, so I'd go all the way around the school perimeter and take my time. Well, I'm very grateful to have a house, and a house with a great view to the hills, especially through all the months of captivity. And I often think what it must be like to lose a home for whatever reason. So I'm going to read this poem. It's called My House is Dissolving. Glass wavers to a mirage. A bumblebee drones through window holes. Last slates scatter into swifts. It was definitely there last night. I bedded down between barricades of boxes when the rain began pelting the roof. It must have decided it isn't needed, since today is cloudless and so blue. This facade. Birds drench the whole with song. A small lake gurgles up, lapping and rippling. There's nowhere to squat, apart from the tiny proscenium of the front doorstep. It has been a very disturbing year, I think. You know, in the winter, we had the worst floods I've seen in 41 years with the river. And then we had drought in April and COVID. So that poem often makes me think of my father, who was a prisoner of war. So I'll read this poem next. It's called Wind Through Poplars. On that breathless day, riverside poplars stirred and sighed. Heart-sized leaves trembled, though the wind rested. I thought it was your voice whispering, impatient, that my 2-year-old legs ran out of strength. Maybe this was the moment you saw Mum's illness start in weariness, foresaw its pain stretching out like barbed wire, how strands would snap off and coil around the house, snag us no matter how carefully we tried to step through. As I grew, the poplars called me, their shelter more generous than the pollarded willows, pegging your childhood territory to mine. Yours bristled straight along dikes, mine back-bended over meanders. In the prevailing southwesterlies of leaf speech, it's closest to your suppressed hushes, most like the rush of the Kenwater mill race undercutting roots. In winter, gnarly trees burl to faces, mutter like your low country German, groaning over the North Sea with whispers of old war losses. On my last visit to you in hospital, I turned my back on TV, lifted your raspy breaths to the open window and sent them across town to the same stand of poplars which took your restlessness into their own, shushing and hissing, eager to shed their leaves. So when I've always lived really within sight of the hills, apart from when I was at college in Yorkshire, and even then I could get out into the countryside every day. But I've always had a pull to the hills, never the shops. My mum took me to see Father Christmas in Hereford when I was 2, and I hadn't really wanted to go to the shops or kiss strange men ever since. So I'll start with this one, which starts the collection, Prelude. Swinging high over grown-ups' talk or sunbathing front garden board, my eyes drift from earwigs pincing gladioli to the distant scarp of Hay Bluff, the trig point of all my school bus journeys, bike rides and hikes. Black Mountains, Brecon Beacons, Radnorshire Hills lured me from the lowlands to their crinkled horizons, promising the source of streams, morn pools, cums, with common land, ravens and wild ponies. The next one I read. Again, I think we're all probably troubled by the refugee crisis around the world and people who are dispossessed and forced to move. So I'm going to read this poem. It's called Dear Earth-Wrecked Foundling, and I think it's one of Pat's favourites. It's the season of second flowerings, so let's go out and play. Wales is good for sampling light. We can splash in puddles, shake up fallen clouds and sludge. I'll introduce you to birds. Maybe we'll see a kingfisher streak turquoise over turbulent waters, watch wagtails waver, then settle and learn stillness from a heron. Now is a good time to meet trees. You can build a refuge of fallen leaves, but don't be alarmed by bombardments of acorns and conkers. You can forgive them for their shine. I'll try not to shiver you with my worries that the air will soon be exhausted, soils will fail to raise harvests, fish will suffocate in ocean plastic. Learn to be surprised now and for the rest of your life. Today, a boy who tossed his school desk like a ship in a tempest turned up in my yard to choreograph scaffolding poles. He effortlessly constructed a lattice of planks strong enough to stand on. I'm surprised by you showing up, just as all my praise songs turn to elegies. Actually, this poem was inspired on the train line that passes a field away from here. The last train back from Aberystwyth is 7:30 in the evening, but in the winter that can feel quite late. So this is called Back from the End of the Line. Tonight I'm on the run from narratives. I want this near ghost train to run blank film and wipe my head clear. Empty seats double, giving night a wide berth. Lights project fluorescent ribs onto black. A pinhole moon shines through shuttering. The only stars to pierce November clouds are hill farms as we ratchet in stop frames up to Tellervig Halt. I don't want complications, arcs or crises, just want to be rock and rolled home through what passes for linearity in this folded, impossible to level landscape. I believe that the train track up through Tellervig is the steepest mainline one in Britain. I'm not totally sure of that, but maybe one more?
You've got time for at least two, I would say.
Okay, right. Well, we have lots of people from Shropshire here today, so I'll read this poem. When I say I've always wanted to come to the hills, I don't really feel I feel I am a border person, so I love the Shropshire hills as much as the Welsh hills. And if we had a chance for a day out round the Longmynd, I'd always jump at it. So this is a poem about my mother and what Wimberries, Winberries, Bilberries, they have lots of names, but in Shropshire they're usually Wimberries. Water beads and berry bloom are scrying pools. They show you at your happiest, a girl on the Longmynd gathering Wimberries. No thoughts of having me or the pains that stopped you walking so young. You're gently combing the low bushes, careful to glean the fruits without bursting them. Oh, so many berries to make one of Granny's pies. Like me now, you're purple-fingered, blue-lipped. Your tongue chases juice, prods the elusive fragrance of taste from these cloud-fed, horizon-coloured fruits. You gave me this inheritance of glut stains, my constant harking back to the hills, to cup the wide sky in wild harebells. And I'll finish with, I'm glad we've got a canine representative here. It's good to see Mr. Ash under the seat. Last year, my dogs came to the reading, so I'll finish with a poem about our lurcher when he wasn't very well. He's fine now. Roadside lurcher. 3 a.m, we're out, washed in moonlight, with the wan tendrils of dead nasturtiums. The vet's opiate hasn't brought any ease, and you pace your pain from plant to plant. Snowdrop buds bead dark soil like coils of dropped rosaries. So late this year, I've felt their absence many times. Now they're conspicuous in starlight. Their silent keeping of white light soothes me, but not you. Each one's a dice dot, which shakes you blundering in a new direction, crying softly. The owl, haloed in the tree, hears you. January's no time to be out long in pyjamas, so we camp together by the stove and shake. Arched high under my fingers, your tremors diminish, but you're tense as the day you were rescued. Thank you very much. I've put an honesty box for books at the back with the prices, so I could do a distance signing if anybody wants it in the interval, maybe. But thank you all very much. Shall I stay here or shall I go?
Yeah, would you stay here? Would you have one of these, which
Oh,
I think
yes,
is already on?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about the question and answer.
So we're just going to do a very short question and answer session. First of all, thank you so much, Chris, for reading some of my favourite poems, especially from your latest collection. There's so many good ones there. I love the idea of your father's breath being taken on the poplars. That's just such a beautiful image. And the refugee poem, learning stillness and meeting trees. I think that's a wonderful concept. And I think something that a lot of us have done more of with lockdown. We've been able to commune with nature. I just want to ask you one question, really, Chris. Your first poem was about spiders, and some of us are very afraid of such things. I wouldn't say I'm afraid of them. I kind of put them in a glass and try to rescue them, but I wouldn't really like one crawling up my arm. I am afraid of moths, and I don't know if you noticed a butterfly making its presence felt. Well, I don't know what it is that's slightly different about butterflies and moths that I didn't freak out. Had that been a moth, I'd have probably headed for the door. So I'm just going to ask you, what are you afraid of? Is there anything that you're afraid of?
Yeah, driving in traffic.
Oh. Is that because of a particular incident, or is it just something you've always dreaded?
I just can't cope with too much movement, too much activity. I like stillness and calm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find I'm all right if there's nobody on the road.
Yeah.
I don't, you don't leave it 44 years after passing your test to drive if you like it. So I really don't like driving.
That's true. And I will just ask you one more question. Do you think anything good at all has come out of this COVID crisis?
Well, it was great to see the reduction in traffic, but I think it's back, and I think at first a lot more people were reflective about the planet, but I don't know, the drive to get back to normal seems to be such a powerful one. Fearful of that, really. Fearful for, I think we do need to make major changes in the way we live to sustain the planet and ourselves.
I agree.
Consumption is in the way.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. Can we please just thank Chris Kinsey again? Okay, so we're going to welcome two of our guest poets, both from Shropshire, both from Shrewsbury area. And that's the lovely thing about hosting one of these events. I get to choose friends and poets that I really admire, and that's certainly the case with everybody today. But I'm very grateful to both Jen and Graham for coming over and bringing Ash the dog as well. So I'm going to introduce to you Jen Hawkins, and again I'll just read from my bit of paper because then I don't miss anything. Jen is an aromatherapist, a lover of words and a teacher. She lives in the county of Shropshire, where the natural outstanding beauty inspires her and influences her writing. Her poems have been published in Prole Magazine and in Diversify, and more recently in Bloody Amazing. And I'm just going to do a little plug for Bloody Amazing. I'm not sure, Kate, have you got a poem in that? No, I thought maybe you had. But Jen has and I have, and it's published by Yaffle Press up in Yorkshire. And it's about everything from puberty and periods, right the way through all the things that happen in a woman's life, right the way through to menopause. And it's one of those things that even today is a little bit, we don't talk about things like that. Well, yes, we do, and it's a fantastic book. So if you want to get hold of a copy of Bloody Amazing, just go on the Yaffle website. But please would you give a very warm welcome for Jen Hawkins.
I think it's worth mentioning that all the profits from Bloody Amazing go to end period poverty as well now, which is really important. So, hello, good afternoon everyone, and gosh, this feels weird. I think this was like the second time this year that I've read rather than like 2 or 3 times a month, so it's very nice to be back and reading again. A very loose collection of poems for you. The first one is called Scab, and it's written about a summer in the 1980s, and it's one of the longest strikes, it was the longest strike that year of a shipyard in a town where I grew up. I'm living in Shropshire now, but you can tell by my accent I'm not from Shropshire originally. And this is simply called Scab. Nervously I pick at the ragged, crusted edges of my bloodied knee. Ozone-charged electricity fills the air, lightning seconds before striking. Dad's at home, has been all summer. So have the other men, united. They won't go back until they get what they deserve. The man who drives the car emblazoned with Jesus is the answer, stands out like a black sheep amongst a flock of angry white. I examine my knee, wonder what the link is between it and the man who crossed the line. And the next one is based on something that happened to my allotment. My allotment seems to influence my writing quite a bit, I've realised, looking through my poems today. And this one's simply called Nesting. That day was one for sorrow. Your nest, carefully concealed deep in dense honeysuckle bower. I never knew you were there, but the magpies did. They'd been watching you, their beady eyes noting your frequent visits to and fro. They took your young, every single one. Your shed roof requiem, a simple service, delivered to our twilight congregation, shared your grief. We try to defend our nests, protect our loved ones from those that trespass against us. Sometimes we fail. That day was one for sorrow. And it was blackbirds. I'm not sure if I mentioned it was a blackbird in there, but it was the blackbirds who lost all their young, which made me cry, actually, and then go home and write that. So, and I hadn't thought of myself as a bird poet, but I seem to have lots of birds in my poems, so there's a couple more with birds in. This one was written at the start of this year, And we thought the start of this year was a bit crazy, then we had everything else that happened, but this was written, set in a particular time at the start of this year, part of a writing group, and our theme was truth. What is truth? And this is what I came up with for my interpretation of truth, and it's simply called Winter Dawn Chorus. Robins, crows, blackbirds and starlings greet new winter dawn. Feet crunch on glistening seven-spanned bridge. Wolf moon sets behind shadowy lindens. Black-winged communal murmurations swoop, soar, dip and rise in new light above freshly bathed fields, a world waking up. Deep azure sky, softly rimmed mother of pearl lining. There's hope, anticipation, a slate wiped clean, ready to begin again. Forget lying presidents, impeachment looming, sending angry golf course tweets. Forget maverick coiffured prime ministers doing the people's bidding to the bitter end. Forget squabbling, disengaged royal families, divided, torn apart, fear-separated nations. Truth is in a winter dawn chorus, the promise of another new day. Another allotment one, which was written further on into this year during the middle of lockdown when I was digging my allotment, and this is what came to me. It's called Bury Me Deeply. Bury me deeply away from crowds in deeply dappled woodland. Let woodpecker hammer out news of my passing, whisper of trees our congregation. Wear no scrap of black, choose brightly coloured prints, flamboyant, joyous patterns. Dance as if there's no tomorrow. To New Orleans jazz funk, and sing loudly together. Tell stories about paths we've shared, jokes we've told, promises we made. Love each other fully, without reserve or condition. Honour this gift of life. Yeah. And my last one is from links to the first one that I read. I'm writing a series of poems about where I grew up and the time that I grew up in. It was near to Blackpool. It was just up the coast from Blackpool. And if anyone's ever been to Blackpool this time of year, you've got the illuminations, the big Blackpool illuminations. We never went to Blackpool because it's just a little bit too far. So this one's called Not Blackpool Illuminations. Blackpool sounded like a long way down winding roads, unfamiliar routes, far from home. Morecambe was nearer, just across the bay. We bundled into the car, tucked in like well-swaddled sardines, rattled down the A590, sucking humbugs, spotting landmarks. Wrapped tightly in woolly layers, trundled down fairy-lit prom, marvelled at frosted glass promises of happy times. Hesham blinked on the horizon as we ate our fish and chips, locally sourced in the bay, lit from within with a different kind of light. Thank you.
You can tell the regard that I have for Jen's poetry because when I had a pamphlet launched, my debut pamphlet in October, Jen was one of the poets that I wanted to read at that launch. And I very much hope that we're going to see her in print at some point soon because I think she's very, very deserving. Thank you so much. Now, Graham, you didn't send me any biog, so you get what I've written. So, Graham's first pamphlet, Absurd Ape, was published in 2017, and his latest, New Face in Hell, was published by Bear Fiction in 2018. Both are frank and challenging and express Graham's unique take on a world that's thrown him a few curveballs, all of which he's survived, and some. So please welcome Graham Attenborough.
Hello. Okay, so I've got a few poems. I was furloughed earlier in the year. I work part-time at the moment in a car park, very nice car park. Lots of interesting people. This is in Shrewsbury, right in the centre. And so this is just a short little poem about an average day in the car park. It's very short. It's called On the Bright Side. And it's a true story. It was August in the car park, and the rain bounced off the tarmac like trampolines. A family of tourists struggled into cagoules. "Oh, it's such a shame," she said. "We've got a river trip booked today." "Well, look on the bright side," I said. "If the boat sinks, at least you'll still be wet." As Pat said before, I've got a poem called, a pamphlet called New Face in Hell, which is set in the 1980s, and I was a heroin addict in Bristol at the time. And the last poem in that pamphlet is me going off to rehab, and the follow-up pamphlet that I'm in the middle of writing at the moment is about what happened after that, basically. And I was lucky enough to go to a brilliant rehab in Hampshire. So I'm just going to read a few poems from that quickly. So this one's called Eyes in the Stars. We were talking about possible futures, what we'd do and where we'd be when we did it. There was the usual guff about money, great careers, villas in the sun. Wayne dreamed of a beautiful wife and a big house, sports cars and perfect kids. Clem would busk around the world, get famous, and buy himself a set of new teeth. Bonnie thought being happy was the thing, wherever, whatever you did. I said I didn't know, was just grateful for being alive, but I wanted to laugh and listen to music, witness the world go round. In the laundry, we watched the drums spin, danced to the rhythm of the dryers. I sang the lyrics from Room to Live, the line about eyes in the stars. Mo asked me for a meaning. I said it was the opposite to having stars in your eyes. And talking of Mo, these are people that I met there. I met some amazing people there. It's not a real name, but so this one's called Mo. Mo was addicted to drugs for sure, but her real demon was food. She couldn't see it herself. For her, it wasn't a problem. When she was making shapes in the dance mirror, we saw a skeleton pirouetting. All she could see was weight. Meal times were difficult for Mo, all that gross food and faces stuffed. She put on a good show. She was practiced in the art of illusion. I had a soft spot for Mo. We'd arrived in the same week. Neither of us could sleep. Both had the sweats and zits. We talked of smack and other drugs we missed. But whilst I piled on the pounds, Mo just kept being sick. Eventually, they shipped her out to some clinic further south. It was sad. We all wanted her to stay. A few weeks later, Jane told us she had run away and disappeared. That was the last time we ever heard of Mo. And another character there called Bridget. She was a solicitor's wife. Big house in the suburbs, 3 boys and cars, the proper life. She knew her way around the kitchen, impressed his colleagues with sparkle and wit, the ideal wife. It started with a little drink to wash down happy pills from the private GP's script, And on her trips into the city, she sought adventure on the scene, got flirting with some bomber jacket rogue, snorting and then jacking up so she wasn't there when the boys got home. The kitchen was a mess. The other half would find her wiped out on the bathroom floor. He hit her and hid her from their friends. Demons always win out in the end. Shoplifting and prostitution brought her bourgeois kindness in with us. She was older, full of stories of the 60s, of India and the Middle East. If only she'd kept moving, kept living instead of turning into dust, perhaps she might have made it past 50, reached 100 on a beach somewhere. They had to smash down her bedsit door in Portsmouth. She never made it to the promised land. And I'll do this one. This one's called Ghosts. It's about the house, the great big house in the country, the rehab, Alpha House it was called. There were ghosts in that house. I never saw one but felt them just the same, up in the eaves where the offices were. It was my job to check the windows. It was a piece of cake, but not this night. As soon as I pushed on the fire door, I knew an ancient terror gripped. Upstanding hair on the back of my head, there was something malignant there, some force of nature beyond me. So I turned on my heel and fled. One night the women came shouting from their dorm. They'd all seen a shadow on the ceiling, but it wasn't a shadow. It was something else, a nameless thing that lowered itself slowly, closer to the top bunk, like a giant black beanbag, she said, suspended in the air, coming closer to engulf her, to cover her in hell. Some of the men just laughed, hysterical female fancy. But I saw the horror in their faces, could see the bruises flowing in her eyes. A few nights later, our dorm exploded in a fight. Someone flicked the switch and Dylan was on the floor, locked in a struggle for his life. He told us later he'd been crushed by weight, unable to breathe, his eyes sucked out. The staff said he'd had a bad dream, but those eyes were the reddest I've ever seen. Years later, Dave told us the truth, that they'd known all along but kept it secret. It had happened to him in the staff bedroom. And I'll finish with one of my So Anyway poems. These are kind of true stories, true encounters. This one's about my T-shirt. Yeah. Okay. So it's called So Anyway, George Orwell. So anyway, I went into this coffee shop and the barista said, "What's your T-shirt say?" So I showed him. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. "I don't get it," he said. "It's not a joke," I said. "It's a quote from Animal Farm." He went, "What's Animal Farm?" I said, "It's a book by George Orwell. It's a classic. The farm is a metaphor for Stalinism." He went, "What's Stalinism?" I said, "The Soviet Union, the Russian Revolution." "Have you heard of George Orwell?" Nothing. I said, "You should try 1984, mate. It's the best dystopian novel you'll ever read." He went, So anyway, I had a black Americano and a vegan flapjack. Very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Graham. That book, New Face in Hell, is really, really worth reading. But I'm so looking forward to this next chapter. Graham's poems are always so full of characters, and they're poems that you can understand. You know, they're not full of so many images and metaphors that you're just left behind. He really includes the reader, so that's fantastic. Thank you very much. I make it 25 past, so can we just have a very quick comfort break? But I absolutely am going to start again at 25 too. So if you're not back here, I will have started so that we keep to the schedule. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Thank you. Oh, you took it there. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't mixing up the glasses. Thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed it. Everybody's going to be so different. Yeah, that's feels right. Yeah, if you haven't particularly engaged with one word, then they get a chance with another. Well, I don't know how it's everyone else's access. Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah.
You all going well so far?
Yeah, seems to be right.
I know it's horrible, isn't it? I'm sitting here and I'm sort of aware that where are they pointing? I am going to sort of keep to my word because we're on a tight schedule to finish as close to 5:30. What time's your train go to Newtown? What time does it leave Newtown? 3:42.
Either that or the later one. That's what I was saying.
Because if it's 3:42, that means we've got 12 minutes
Oh,
when
right,
this
no.
finishes. So
That's fine.
So
I can get
4:15, is it?
No, I think that's like when the bus would leave here.
Oh, right.
The actual train from Newtown would be like an hour after.
Right.
So it would be at 4:40.
Right.
So is that better?
That's better for us. And you'll be able to perhaps have a look around and have a cup of tea.
That's probably why I looked at the ticket, because I looked at the timings.
That's a bit tight for us.
So if it
Because
finishes at
I'd have to just leave here
Oh,
and
yeah.
load and everything, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, if there's anybody who hasn't taken their seats out there, call them in, because we're going to start. Okay, so our next headline poet is Kate Garrett. She is a writer with witchy ways and a folklore, history and horror obsession. She is the magical editor of Moody Chick magazine, and her own writing is widely published online and in print. Her next pamphlet, A View from the Phantasmagoria, I think is out now. Yes, it's out now. And her historical time-hopping verse novella, Heart and Halfpenny, will be published by Twist It Press in 2021. Born and raised in rural southern Ohio, Kate moved to the UK in 1999, where she still lives with her husband, children and cat, currently in an off-duty vicarage on the Welsh border. So Kate has come today on the train, and my first meeting of Kate was through the online magazine Pickaroon, which I think you've finished now, or it's on hold for a little while. But a fantastic magazine, and I think you've run sort of 2 or 3, sometimes concurrently. And that's one of the things about Kate, is that she's got plates spinning and balls are being juggled. She just manages so many things and has a family and a busy life as a poet and as a magazine editor. So please would you give a very warm welcome to Kate Garrett.
Hi, thank you, and thanks so much, Pat, for inviting me here, and for, is it John and Kathy, who run this beautiful, beautiful site. Oh, it's lovely. So, I've got this odd little pamphlet that was published last September, and it's about being a changeling, which naturally I'm not actually, but as far as I know. But I think a lot of us feel a little odd and out of step, and it's kind of easy to imagine why that was ever a belief that anyone had. I was in my adult life diagnosed with autism, so some of it's about that, but some of it's just about feeling like you don't quite fit, and this is an elf in the witch garden. It's got spiders and birds in it. I was saying to Jen outside, it's got to tie everything together. Breaking hexes in the hydrangeas, concocting desire with bees and valerian, the purple heads reach her waist, and under high walls, she looks just like you. Fortune-telling tapestries lace the washing line. She duels with a spider and loses. Sometimes a loss is a win. Harvesting sparkle off a slug's back, gemstones for her fingers, this is where she grows. This is where the city ends and cats congregate. Superstitious magpies wish on bedroom windows, see their own reflections as she salutes them. She tames jackdaws who promise to lift her up. And under high walls, she looks just like you, breaking hexes. This is where you grow. Changeling. Noun. A strange, ugly child left in exchange for a beautiful, wanted child. My mother sings, mucking out the barn. The melody reaches me, but she can't see her daughter. I stare into our mare's deep brown eyes, 9-year-old thoughts forming. I like you, but I do not love you. She blows warm air across my cheek. Her coarse mane frames solid shoulders, strong, even teeth cracked mirror a crooked smile. While the scents of saddle polish and grain swaddle the sunlit May morning. She turns her head to nuzzle her foal. My mother stops to gaze at them. I stand alone, absently plaiting grass with hay. I love you, but I do not like you. I turn away in the space between and laugh at the empty pasture. So this one is actually called That Merry Wanderer of the Night, which is named after a much more famous fairy than me, Puck. I don't think I would be anywhere without, so many of us wouldn't be anywhere without Shakespeare, but that play in particular, I don't know if I could have written this little pamphlet without the influence of that growing up. When I was afraid of the dark, the leaden pull of demon lures bobbing the surface of the void, the chill smoke perfume of ghosts, the coven's laughing abandon, I turned away, practiced precisely crepuscular magic, my small flat feet treading periwinkle air, seeking rain rivers between the pines, reading portents in the position of Venus. As I grew into this world, I found the darkness had its uses. The demons and I were first name acquainted. The ghosts burned soft, their bodily absence a gentle incense. The coven was inside me all along. I came to love the midnight pitched around me, inked into my skin, a moon temple sown through reaching trees, where I could swirl and spin and hold the stars. So as Pat mentioned, I do have a new pamphlet called A View from the Phantasmagoria. And a phantasmagoria, broadly speaking, so like a series of images, like a dreamlike sequence of visions, or more specifically, like an illusion exhibition. They were popular in 19th century Europe. But this is actually, strange that you mentioned Bloody Amazing, because this is actually, it's a supernatural horror collection, but it's also about premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which causes 1 in 20 women and AFAB people have this. It's like, I call it PMS on demons, which goes a long way to explain this book, because people do die of it. It causes like suicidal ideation and a lot of problems, and it's physical health as well as mental. It's your body not reacting properly to the hormones that are just perfectly normal. So I thought I should give a background to that, but I could just read the poems and say nothing, but like Pat says, it's important to stand up and say, like, yeah, we need to talk about this stuff because it's quite a dangerous illness. But these are like 2 poems about sleep disturbances with a sort of nice, lovely thing in the middle. So he says, no to déjà vu, but I've heard it all before. Sometimes, even when I've slept for hours, grey gathers at the corners of my eyes, a dawn vignette, and you are speaking. Everything you say is something I can predict, because I know we talked about this months ago. You tell me again how you don't believe in déjà vu, because you've never felt the fog of it. Just like last time, when you laid out your reality in these words, in this room, the light played on your cheekbone and chin as it does today, but it was summer then. Now it's winter, and I know real life is no better than a lucid dream. I must reach out and make one thing different. I must bend your tongue away from this conversation to a point when the next step is the first new moment of the morning. It will taste of breaking free. It will taste like a glitch. Freedom is a glitch in a snowstorm, walking a circular track, looping back to a fork in the green June road until it is February again, when the sun has gone cold, but is trying its best to warm us. And this is revival. There's like little sort of spell-like ritual-type poems in between, because I think if you do have too much doom and gloom, there are things that can relieve that. So it's just a poem about resting, to be honest. And honeysuckle. Summer is a climb, a pilgrimage of gold and green, and in these honey blossoms is your goddess gift of well-earned rest, before the amble down to mulch and snow. Woodbine twines around my ankles, knees, and infinite harvested sunbeams quiver in the grass, hug the soles of feet aching with a week of unknown sorrow, legs heavy from sparring with the devil's kin. Brushing dirt from my hands, I hear a whisper of, this too shall pass. My grandmother's wisdom like a warm hand at the base of my neck. And yeah, well, sleep disturbances. So sometimes when I'm very, very exhausted, I have like déjà vu, and I also get sleep paralysis, which is no fun. And it feels like this. The nightmare tells me I've passed the test. Sometimes when I wake, my body is lead and iron. I don't try to move my limbs. I know she stands in the doorframe, a charcoal sketch with a vulpine smile, or she's in the garden or on the stairs, anticipating my signal. I've seen her through my fused eyelids. I always see her and she tells me, this is war. Every one of these dark mornings is a time of still and silent trial. She stands there and I lay here, and behind the menace, the tendon-snapping teeth, a prize waits for me to claim it. I only need to meet her gaze, calm the quake in my shoulders, undo the unseen buckles binding my breath, push this blood-borne chill out of my body into hers. Her hematite eyes blaze with understanding as my ribcage at last expands. The sound of air rushing down my throat dispels her shape into static. The crackle of her voice hits the space between us before my head bolts off the pillow. You are my best student. Each battle I'm sent to start, you win. So I don't know if anyone's ever had sleep paralysis, but it's like you can't move and you're half awake and your eyes are shut. And it's really odd. Just checking the time. Okay. Solitaire. Once upon a time, I shuffled cards, exchanged insights on the suits of wands and pentacles for cups of wine and 10 cigarettes. Everyone's clarity comes in a different package. Back then, a north wind cut through clouds of tar that wouldn't stick on lungs too young to be anything other than invincible. I'd tell them their new jobs would work out fine, to make plans for holidays. The questions they asked of a girl who walked among them dusted with soot and salt, they were easy to answer for Saturn's stray daughter, who couldn't say she'd ever seen the Pleiades, but knew the wisdom of hiding inside a yew tree and waiting for spring. I don't know why anyone took advice from a 19-year-old reading the tarot, but they did. I still do read the tarot, but I just look back on my younger self like, sometimes you give okay advice to other people, or you're way too young to have worked out your own life, and that's what was going on there. This is a poem about a very, very late night train between Manchester and Sheffield that was the most bizarre train journey I've ever had. To sum it up, it was like the last train, and when we got into Sheffield Station, it was 20 minutes early, and they said, "You've now reached Manchester Piccadilly." It was very confusing. If you'd just been to a poetry event and you were out late with your friends, and we were all like, "What?" But it felt really magical and strange. It was a very liminal sort of thing. On a Thursday, Friday train. It's late and your whiskey is wrapped in a map of the world. We three take gentle sips around the table and hope for choppy seas, wind and rain, to harmonize with the sound of the long late-night train passing through Huddersfield like a wrong-way phantom. You've said you are certain you're not destined for great things, but this makes me too sad, and I look at another kind of map. Relieved to see the sky in the moment you were born says, you could be a constellation to outshine us all. Now you tell me, you accuse, as if it's too late, but it's never too late. The problem is we all think we know too much about time. We talk of estuaries, the magic of mixing a river and the sea, waiting in a perpetual moment. We talk of those moments while passing through them. I want to point out the waters where the map doesn't say here be monsters, but should, so I can show you both where we need to sail. A kraken is nothing to fear. Come with me, you won't get sick if you stay on deck, I promise. When the shipping forecast says it's squally in the Irish Sea, we congratulate whatever gods could hear us. We each spoke a pantheon. One of them had to be listening. I'm just checking my timing. How much time do I have left? 5. Okay. So I'm going to skip ahead to this one, and it's quite a longer one. And I'm going to hope I can get through it without tearing up. There are things in it that it's about loss, and then pregnancy loss, and a happy ending, because it's also about my daughter Bonnie, who was born with a heart defect, and that's another way I got to know Pat, because one of the magazines I ran is called Bonnie's Crew, because she's named after Anne Bonny the pirate. And she's really tough, and she's 2.5 now, and she's amazing. Her heart condition has got so much better over time. But it was very scary because we didn't know she had it. When she was born, it was like a shock, one shock after another. But this is kind of like mythologizing my own child, but what are poets if we don't do things like that? So it's the 5th and final. 1. It is Beltane, and the lost one is trying to come home. Tapping my belly, expecting an eggshell. Instead, ghost fingers meet a soft scarlet hollow. I know her from years before, when she made a wrong turn and headed back fast, hoping I wouldn't notice the mistake. She left me stained with the salt reverb of tears and blood on a bathroom floor in southeast London. I feel her now, waiting on acceptance from her 20 years mother. And when it does hit, it isn't lightning but a blossom where her ghost fingers tap. And I know she is the still missing child, the 5th and first, the 5th and final. And maybe she will never come back, but under the bed is a green pouch of herbs, spiral seashells nestled inside wishes, thrown on a mazy fire, drunk with a potion of gin and elderflower to pull open the curtains of summer. On the bed, close and hoping, my love and me, the walls hear nothing but the swish of breath on skin. 2. This year, the harvest is a waning of sickness, a waxing strength in my body to carry her through 2 more seasons. We learn she is the girl I knew she'd be. The secret I was holding still in disbelief. Her dad drinks a little bourbon to celebrate daughter number 2. Each day's sunset is a quickening darkness. We rest in scarlet reflections, feel her feet in the rising hill of my belly. I swallow August's foraged blackberries and remember centuries of other mothers, hear psalms sing through my veins in my great-grandmother's voice. 3. At the end of October, this new life continues to grow. Autumn drops, drifts to winter, leaves to bonfires, ash into snow. A daughter will be a mother, will be a warrior, will be a destroyer, will be a creator, will one day be a crone. I catch the scent of dry border cider and remember being 18, buying a candle in Amish country. I fell asleep with it burning beside my bed, dreamt I was drowning in cinnamon. I dreamt my mouth and nose were sealed with wax. I dreamt I was a letter, hand-delivered through a blood-orange window to a place I'd never been. Sunset bled through my eyelids while I dreamed. It was early October. Everything was golden when I awoke. Within a year, I was gone. Tonight, there is a party I will not attend, though my body will be present. Tiny alien swims back and forth, lulls me to sleep. Her slosh and sway pull me back from conversations. I only want to think of graveyards, a lungful of apple smoke witching hour. 4. Petitioning. We bring her home, a little bird bundled against cold so bright after a week of rain. She'd risen from the warm sanguine sea to a storm cloud world, to a mother's love, to a fear in me she met with her dark blue eyes and a cry fit to silence it. Though her skin was pale and chilled and it snaked between her heartbeats like a jazz hi-hat, a warning beside her hospital bed, the faith I'd danced around for decades pushed through like February snowdrops. The night nurses turned her monitors to the wall and I petitioned a saint, a goddess of milk and fire. I prayed to a god, a ghost whose love, they say, saved us all. At last we bring her home, a little bird bundled, carrying the flame of early spring in the right-hand chambers of her heart. We open the honey flow of mead, drink a belated toast to new beginnings. Right. I will finish on a tiny, tiny poem called Moonwise. I can't come to Wales and not read a poem in honour of Cerridwen, the goddess and her cauldron, and I've been absolutely in love with her since I was 16. And she's got me out of a few scrapes, I think. It was the only remedy. Turn to me, she soothed. I was alone, just far enough from home to be afraid. But there was the moon above and between the trees, and there was me, asking a myth to show me the way, putting my fears in her cauldron, promising to always do her work, promising what she already knew. Asking, please just straighten the road home, get me past the horror of subdivisions, into open country. And I trusted her, and I drove, turned unfamiliar corners left and right until the night opened up and the highway appeared, but it still took me 6 months more to get home. And by then I understood home was the journey, that where I belonged was as much in the movement as it was in the pausing. Her magic is stronger here than it was there, strongest when the moon is hidden, over Gravesend, over Rill, over Birmingham, anywhere I've ever been lost. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Although I've known of Kate for an awful long time now, that's the first time I've actually heard a full set, and what an absolute privilege to hear a full set from Kate, so I'm really thrilled about that. I loved some of the lines, she looks just like you, and then also that repeated line, I like you, but I do not love you. That's a very hard thing to come to terms with, but it's very honest as well, isn't it? Why should we always love our children when they're first born? You know, why should we? So I think that's very telling. And there was a line, I know you've borrowed the line, this too shall pass, but it's a real positivity And I think it's a real message for our times at the moment. Yeah, this too will pass. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that poem about the invincibility of youth. And, you know, you're sucking on fags and you think, this won't kill me, you know, this drink won't kill me, these drugs won't kill me. And, yeah, we just believe we're invincible, don't we? Or we did a long time ago in my case. I just want to ask a couple of questions. You and I have both shared a life experience recently in that we both moved houses. And I just wanted to ask you, what was the worst thing about moving house and what's been the best thing about moving house?
Oh gosh, okay, is this working?
Well, I hope they are. I'm sort of holding it here. Well, I was told we don't need to turn them on, but...
Well, I wouldn't say there was a worst part as such this time, because I'm going by the fact that the previous house move, while it was only 5 minutes down the road in Sheffield, my fourth child, my daughter Saoirse, was 5 days old and I was recovering from a C-section. So that was an awful, awful house move. This time, I think just moving with 5 children, 125 miles, because we moved from Sheffield to Ludlow, that was hard. But I was so happy to be moving that I don't think there was a worst part so much. The admin's always pretty bad, like new doctors, new schools, all that. But other than that, there wasn't any. No, it was great compared to the very short move beforehand. The best part is the fact that I now live in Ludlow, and 20 minutes from Wales, and in a lovely, lovely historical town, and near my in-laws, who are so happy to have the children nearby.
And we're lucky because we can have you again.
Yeah, I haven't seen poetry friends face to face since March in just so long. It's so good to see you and meet new people.
Great.
So yeah.
Thank you. And then the final question I'd just like to ask, Graham's poem about a ghost.
Oh yes.
And that sort of echoed. And I just wanted to ask, do you believe in ghosts?
Sort of. I mean, I do. But I would like just the same if somebody says to me, do you believe in God or actually the goddesses or anything that I write about? It's more things in heaven and earth, Horatio sort of thing. Yeah. Like, I do believe in it. Could I explain it to any of you? No. But I do think a lot of strange things do happen.
Yeah. Have you had an experience where you thought that was a little bit strange?
Yeah. Quite a few ghosty ones.
Yeah.
Particularly when I was with one of my exes, a lot of weird stuff used to happen in his house. Like I felt and heard someone walk through the room and go bop, bop, bop to one of the cats, and the cat was responding to that, and there was no one there, and it was a very odd
weird
moment.
Yeah.
But like lots of little things like that, really. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So, another big round of applause, please, for Kate Garrett. Again, what's so wonderful about these occasions is that we can have poets that are so different and so diverse, and we've already heard from such great voices. We're going to finish today's reading with Glyn Edwards, and I'll just read, no relation by the way, I'll just read from my notes about Glyn. Glyn Edwards' first collection, Vertebrae, is published by the Lonely Press. He has co-edited Cheval and the annual Parthian anthology of the Terry Hetherington Award for Welsh Young Writers, and he's been guest poetry editor for The Lonely Crowd. Glyn has been the poet in residence at the Chester Literature Festival and the Dylan Thomas Boathouse. Very jealous of that gig. And he's had writing published by Verve Press, they're over at Birmingham, and The Guardian. Glyn's poetry has featured in a poetry jukebox installation used as libretto in Manchester and has been translated into Welsh and Greek. Glyn has an MA in creative writing poetry from MMU, Manchester Metropolitan, and he works as a teacher in North Wales. But I'm reliably informed that he doesn't have to go to work tomorrow, so he's here with his lovely wife and son, and they can take their time driving back up to North Wales. I had the very great privilege of reading at Gladstone's library with Glyn. Was it back in February or November or February? Yeah. And another Edwards was there as well, Jonathan Edwards. So there was a bit of a clan gathering, really. But I've got to know that Glyn is a really lovely human being, as are all the poets that we've been able to invite today. And it just makes such a difference when people are nice and decent and, you know, you share values with them. So please can we give a very warm welcome to Glyn Edwards.
It's always nice when you're introduced as a very lovely human being, but you can see your wife and your son shaking their head in the back of the room. He's not, is he, Mum? No, he's not. Thank you very much for having me, and also for allowing me to be part of a collective again. It's really quite wonderful to have art again in my time. I think my wife's found me particularly unbearable in the past few months. And even today, the thought of just doing something out of the ordinary became quite burdensome until I arrived and saw Pat and Mike and friendly faces in a big busy room, and it's really quite special to be part of that. Thanks also for the opportunity to hear from poets I've heard from before and really enjoyed, and some new poets as well. Thank you. The first poem I'd like to read is, Pat just mentioned it, one of the poems that was written as libretto. So a completely new experience for me was writing for something that would be turned into an opera. And I hadn't valued it too much at the time, but a writer recently in the Irish Times said this was their favourite poem of current, which struck me as quite unusual because it's not mine. But it is a poem that I certainly recognise as being the end of summer and the start of autumn, so I think it fits at the moment. It's called Divining. The sun refused to relent this summer until the soil had withered to a whisper in the wide wildflower meadows, and the land revealed 2 tracks it had kept secret for centuries. For days we counted jays down leaning lanes, climbed gates that had shrugged their hinges, and prized apples from the orchard boughs, where, one morning, you found the first furrow, and we trailed it to the woods of our world edge. You garnered seeds to mark a path back, shrank when the crows clapped from the bank, though soon you'd scouted the tree line for nests, quarried toads from their burrows, scratched our names in silver on the birches. At the 2nd Avenue, you begged to explore alone, and left me at the limestone pavement to wait while you tore the fissure through ash and yew and returned with wild tales about waterfalls and otter spoor and dropping rocks in a red pool. And you forged the bottomless day all the way home, while the estuary shrank beyond the tight-lipped limes and the windmills stilled. Before bedtime, you drew the brook you divined and smelted the warmest sunset in ore crayons. We left without breakfast, tried to outpace the empty roads as the quick clouds filled the grey sky. The wheelbarrow stands were stripped of lavender, the egg boxes barren, and the land prepared itself for the rain that would silence our summer and close its paths again. When we had the opportunity to go and listen to this song being turned into like a violin piece, and it's funny that the consultation disappeared. So when you gave the ideas, they didn't come back to you saying, what do you think about this? But if they had, I would have said, I wouldn't repeat the word otter spoor over and over and over. It was really bizarre standing in a church in Manchester hearing someone say, otter shit, over and over and over. Right. My little boy's with us here, and it's amazing that he hasn't sort of dominoed everyone's chair over at the moment. So we tend to read a poem about him. This is one about him and how we stopped one day by the side of the road to watch the starlings. We're lucky to live on the coast, so we get some pretty spectacular October starling displays. This one's called The Hide. Yellow lights lean into the hide like daffodils, warming the hands of the trembling, dawn-eyed boy. Peering at the pressed open pages of his books, it winks on the metal flask the father filled and spilled earlier, beguiled by birds. Before winter, by the gorse, the birds next door's cat was too proud to hide, were quickly buried by the father in a hole little bigger than his clumsy hands. Then, like a story from a bedtime book, he explained a little of death to the boy. Once those words stopped flapping, the boy perched by the window and breathed out birds on the glass and coloured them in nature books. He made a nest on the bed, hid the way birds hide, as though feathers would burst from his hands. He'd fan out his fingers and fly to his father. The reed bed yawns a low, sad sound that the father reassures is an old wind groaning. But when the boy mimics the noise in his owl-cupped hands, there is a commotion like a morning alarm, and the birds burst from the blind grasses until the sight from the hide is the same as the murmuration in the boy's books. And the starling sound is the quick turning pages of books. And as the flock ferments and funnels, the father says, "It feels like here, right here, in this creaking hide, we're sat in the core of a greying storm." The boy is hypnotized by the dark sky constellated in birds, nature applauding itself, winds clapping like hands. And as the chorus relents, the pair link their hands, and as starlings drop as ash from burning books back to their roosts, soon the dawn sky is bare of birds. "Could you draw it if you saw it again?" says the father. "I could draw them forever," answers the boy, while the birds crackle like cinders around the hide. After dusk, he hands his sketchbooks to his father, who cloaks his arm like a wing around the boy as they leave. Yellow light drains from the hide. It was my one sole ever attempt at trying to write a sestina. I think I'll commit myself before I have another go at doing it. We were intending to drive down today via Dolgellau and places of brilliant Welsh literary heritage. And as it was, we came down the A55 and dropped straight down. So we avoided a lot of the places that I was hoping we'd pass. One of those was R.S. Thomas's home in Eglwysfach. And we used to stop before we had our son and just go into the black church and wander around the black church. Now we've got Arthur. The last time we stopped, it was in the lay-by beyond the church, and Arthur had his head buried in a Tesco bag for life, and as the windy roads took the better of him. 26, okay. So lots of the poems in this book were sort of replies. I took famous poems, established poems, and wrote responses from some of the characters. So this is Iago Pryddach, who R.S. Thomas wrote many poems in dedication to, or maybe not as grand as that, just about. And this is Iago Pryddach's response. Iago Pryddach is standing in the vestibule. "Why then do you fly up to this hill's shoulder, while I quarry moles from the clouds and tie their tails to trembling fence wire, but to stare at a peasant's numb hands and fret why God wields the forlorn fingers so, or to draw my hangman's hall as lines and notes to a vile music, dumb and remote. In pulpit plumage, wings black as mass, your bone-white head cruelly balances like a rook's beak, and you become crow, forcing famine down into the guts of wet notebooks, until I approach, waving the barrels of my weary arms, and you are dark feathers and air, gone, descending to haunted churches to stalk meaning from the emptiness. Sleepily, I'll seek stars at soft fires, and you will lean long from your gloom to poke again at my tired carcass, as though the fairness of my heart, not yours, requires meaning breathed into it. I heard a documentary about R.S. Thomas on BBC Sounds. It was great. We just went outside during lockdown, and I spent about 2 hours listening to R.S. Thomas talk about birds and how despite his despite his position in the church, he had very ambiguous feelings towards that position, and I think I like him a little bit more post the documentary than I did when I wrote that poem. It was quite a cynical approach, I think. Someone else who I knew very little about until I came upon him in school, actually, and then I've learnt more since, is Hedd Wyn. So we were hoping to drive down past Trawsfynydd, and my wife and I, we stopped there once in his house. And I don't know if anybody's been to Trawsfynydd, to Hedd Wyn's house. You have. Did you have the experience where his uncle showed you around? No. His uncle must have been in his late 80s. Pardon? Nephew. I'm so sorry. Of course, it can't be his uncle, unless we're revisiting the ghost from earlier. His nephew. Yeah, sorry. Hedd Wyn was his uncle, but he himself was a relic of that now. And we went into the house without. There was no signage. We didn't know how to get into the house. We just walked in, and he was there with his sort of like his underpants were here, and his shirt and his trouser line were here, and he seemed like he was a nice person, although he was far too intrigued by my wife and hugging her and sort of giving her more than one sort of friendly greeting kiss. It was so it went on and it went on and it went on until suddenly this crowd of people arrived, and he turned into quite a showman. So this is Hedd Wyn's nephew. Irisgurrin. The old and silenced harps are hung on yonder willow trees again, which is a line from War by Hedd Wyn. I've lost the word. He is shrugging, winking, thinking of which artifact he should summon from a tablecloth checkered in the relics that rested on Hedd Wyn's wartime farm. Casting, he nods with certainty. Why is the handle of the cast iron kettle cold when the base is burning? The light limps into the parlour and skulks those sat in meagre silhouette. It's too dark to read the spines of the books by the range. Too quiet to ask why ripped paper sags and screens the beams. So the old clock twitches and the room leans nearer to the sheep-haired storyteller in his flat cap, and to tales of his dead uncle, the white crucifix, the black chair. 100 years ago, in a shelter dug down in some thudding field near Ypres, the man must have measured how alike these trench trophies were to the antlers above his mantelpiece. He must have known the barometer, grin behind mustard glass, was as foggy as the one on his dresser, that the uniformed boy cradling himself in sleep rocked like the chair at the fire, and that groaning, gathering din was as inevitable as his falling stalls, his failing crops. Here too, he could flake the bark off the beams with his studded boots and see the rains bloat the wood. He could crook his forehead against a strut like the one supporting his stable, and know, over the parapet, he would always be at war. The handle is cold because the owner left it that way. I think but do not say, and the question simmers in the silence. For all of his relics that were on the farm, it was the sign about his barn, and like a notice that said Hedd Wyn was known to have banged his head against this this strut, and the people were just stood there looking at it. Wow, a monumental strut. I think it's had an awful lot of money put into it now, a lot of investment. So it should be quite a special place now if you go up the Atlantic side of the Irish Sea side of Wales. What do you think? If you're desperate for a cheap kiss or 22, just try it. You'll get a flash of underwear as well. It's probably worth it. Okay. This is we were meant to have an adventure this summer, as I'm sure most of the room was, but instead we had a much smaller adventure, and we went to Whitby for a few days. And one of the days out in Whitby we had was when we went to Robin Hood's Bay and had the chance to go fossiling on the coast there. the experience was quite special, actually. We'd read all about the limestone cliffs there and actually finding fossils at your feet, but we hadn't truly realised how easy it was until they were there and you were picking up ammonites that were at your feet. This is a poem called Marrow. I wanted a collection of skulls when I was young, when mammoth bones were being dredged from the North Sea like turnips. I sought my own shelf of shapes. A fox's secretive snarl and grainy bulb beak of a swan, the polished fennel root of a rabbit. I expected to discover them nostriling out of the backed lawn like iceberg bones, so I could summon them up with foraging fingers. They would not need jaws hinging or tooth supergluing, no pelt to peel or boil away. The soil would have sucked all sinews, all pulse. No jackals could roam my room, calling me from my sleep. The deer or wolf, the bear, would inhabit the cage of the brain in name alone. I coveted beasts that age had thrown itself at in storms, chiselling them from the cliff edges they'd been coffined. There would be no space on the shelf for matchboxes that rattled with shrews' snouts, thimble-headed reptiles, hurrying, scurrying insects whose colonies were smaller than crania. I made my family understand I hunted only unicorns, plundered divine animals that decayed so many decades ago they barely ever died. Then today, I chased next door's cat from its cruelty and found a swallow unzipped beneath a rose bush. The fledgling was frightening to my son, who saw his shallow mortality in the bird and begged me to bury it deeper than any dinosaur, beyond vertebrae, on a shelf of sand and silt. Okay, so without being able to travel personally, I've been kind of reassured that this poem has been in Paris for the whole of lockdown. It was part of a poetry jukebox project, so you might have seen them. It's like a blue ship's funnel just standing out of the ground, and you go along and push a button. And it was originally in Dublin, but I think because of lockdown they couldn't carry out or couldn't renew the project, so they just took the one from Dublin, and instead of changing the poems there, they just moved it to Paris. And because of the lockdown, they couldn't get rid of it either, so it's been there for about 6 months now. So that's my reckless youth in Paris has been there in the form of this poem. Night fishing. For decades, my dreams were pike, winched up from the barnacle dark, febrile in the ugly dawn, and shameful of scrutiny. At the spinning glint of a pen, or the lure of a bedside light, a pike would flex in my neck as ruthless as a fired shell, and rise at the tense skin of sleep and break it like glass. To trap it, I'd force tired fingers down my throat and catch the dense green gold gills as they thrashed to be swallowed back into crypt of gut. Then I'd haul it from my head in waking gloom and wrap its snarl in puddled paper. In the morning, on the yawning dresser, I would weigh its mean physiognomy, unbutton my flesh from its teeth and find fluency in its jewelled flanks. And later, I would relent my grip on its tail and watch the denuded pike descend into the printed page until its candle eyes went dark. I dream of carp now, basking just below the milky surface, anodyne and abbey pool bland, floating shadows, too fat to land. My wife, with some reasoning, is convinced that I'm absolutely terrified of like giant fish, and I try and tell her I'm not, but like she comes into the, you know, normal people would be caught watching some. Arthur, earmuff it for a second. I can't say it. We'd be caught watching an adult channel or something like that late at night, but my wife comes in and I'm watching River Monsters or something. She's like, what are you doing? You're not looking at fish again, are you? No. You've got a problem. I know. So I think that's one of those latent dreaming about fish as well. Oh, it's terrible. I think for the final poem.
That would be great, thank you.
Okay. Oh no, is that finished now?
No.
You sure?
Yeah, you can do two if you want.
Okay, I'll do a long one then. In fact, I was going to read this one, but I'll finish with something else. Okay. I was going to read that one purely on the basis that it says young Welsh poets on the front of it, and it's just quite incredible that someone can still regard you as young when you certainly don't feel or look that way anymore. It was...
You're young.
Am I? Yeah, okay. I'll go with it anyway then. I got an email a couple of months ago that said, do you want to be part of an anthology that's going to be translated into Greek? So I thought, okay, well, if someone's going to translate it to Greek, let's see what they can translate. So I gave them a really bizarre shape with some inappropriate language in it. And they did it. They translated it to Greek, but I don't know what the Greek says. The Greek might just be, I don't know, someone's shopping list or something like that. But I'm quite proud of it because it's a collection with some really, really good young, genuinely young Welsh poets in there, which I've somehow sneaked into, and it's been put together by Jonathan Edwards as well, which is probably a sign that that I should be quite proud of it. Okay. It's from my next collection, which is finished, and it's all about a teacher mourning the loss of a colleague, and it takes the person in his youth sort of experiencing school and growing up to being a colleague of a person that he respected a lot. Instead, I would look at Venus through my telescope and see the platinum glare before the rest of the night sky manifest itself to distracted street lamps and tight-drawn curtains. I would pretend it was a shared sight. Each evening, of all the lighted worlds our eyes could inhabit, we draw our gaze to the same one. You had other stars to study first, washing hands in lukewarm water, shirt sleeves rolled, reading to your kids too young to remember you, ironing your lessons, loving your wife or showering her away. All points of reference that could have led you anywhere, but you'd search out Venus too. Not your first star, not a star at all, you'd say, but argent, profound. When you asked the class which planet was closest to the sun, I bit my lips hard. Mars, you'd look away to another hand. Earth, the moon, Venus, and it shines so brightly because it reflects so much of the sun's rays. And once you'd let them study the other lights first, you'd found me, and I radiated. Mercury is closest. Venus is next, and it doesn't shine. Its glare comes from a band of gases that permits radiation to enter its atmosphere, but refuses to let the heat escape. The group gathered as you sketched the whiteboard diagram. Someone joked how it looked like a trampled Valentine. Arrows entering and entering and entering, and the heart swelling red and red and red and dead. Venus is cooking itself. I'd drawn stars in pupils' books once. Now, marking is staring at a clouded sky and waiting for it to pass. When I hear the radiator's tired breaths or the final beat of next door's back gate, I count the quiet houses one by one, and in the enchanted dark, I look at Venus. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello.
It's on. Thank you so much, Glyn. I was very interested in the fact that you obviously do a lot of research when you're writing, and the fact that you went to Hedd Wynn's house in Trawsfynydd and that you spent time in Dylan Thomas's boathouse. I'm very interested to know what sort of feelings and inspirations you got from being close to where those two individuals were and to seeing some of the relics and paraphernalia that are to do with them. How did that feel?
Thank you. The Dylan Thomas house is a bizarre one if you've been to Larne. Although structurally it still seems like Dylan Thomas's house as we would suppose it would be. I think it's changed so much from the time that Dylan Thomas was there that the longer you spent there, the more time you felt like it was very contrived. It didn't have any strong connection. You were standing in a room that was a kitchen that wasn't there when Dylan Thomas was there. The outside part had all been renovated. I used to get excited and I'd borrow a key so I could go up to his actual boathouse. And then one of the ladies in the kitchen said, "You know, they bought that from B&Q." And I thought, oh, right, okay. So a lot of the enchantment of that actual building was gone until there was nobody there, and then you just had his estuary or you had his walks. And going on that was the most unique thing, having time to explore in his town. And the most remarkable thing actually was secondary. As part of the residency, a wonderful couple let me stay in their house for a very, very reasonable amount. And it was where his parents had lived and where Dylan Thomas's body had been interred. So the man would take you into the front room where the window had been removed so that they could pass his coffin through. So that was remarkable. And if you go to Larne, his house is stunning, and you can experience that. It's a great exhibition. But there's a green house on the main street called the Pelican, and that's where his parents used to live. And that was really, really really special. I asked the man who ran the Pelican, who owned the Pelican house, what do you think the nearest? Sorry, if this is myth breaking, I'm sorry. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "What do you think the most original Dylan Thomas relic there is in this house?" And he took me outside to a broken toilet, and he said, "There's probably one in there," and that was it, really.
Well, that's real, isn't it?
Well.
Oh, thank you for that. Just one more question, and I might be catching you out a little bit with this, but who are you currently impressed with that's an up-and-coming poet? Is there somebody that you're thinking, gosh, we need to watch this man or woman? I knew it might catch you out a bit. Or is there somebody that you're reading at the moment that you're really enjoying?
I think the books that really influenced how I began to write last year or 2 years ago, none perhaps more so than there's a book called The Long Take by Robin Robertson, and it's just stunning, and it's prose poetry. So that one I just thought was fascinating, and perhaps more than anything else is an American writer who I'm sure you'll have heard of. He's Vietnamese American. He's called Ocean Vuong. And his first collection was it's not his first collection, but the first collection that made, that established his reputation. I think just made me look at everything about poetry completely differently. Yeah. But I tried to send him a message recently on Instagram, and I still look at my Instagram account occasionally to see whether I'm ever going to get a reply, which I know is never coming. It cheapens it a little bit every day goes by that he doesn't just say, "Oh yeah, you're very welcome. You know, lots of people like my book. Kiss, kiss, kiss." Something like that.
I tried to get him to come to Welsh Pool Poetry Festival about 4 years ago, and the amount of money that his agent said that he wanted was more than the entire festival, so I was being a bit ambitious, but I agree with you, fantastic writing, and he comes from such a different place than most of us do, with the background that he's got and his whole story. Thank you very much indeed.
Just out of interest,
yeah.
If I remortgaged my house and sold all my possessions, would it be enough to get him over next year?
Well, we'll try, shall we?
Okay.
We'll have a bit of a crowdfunder or something.
Right, let's do it.
Thank you very much indeed again to Glyn Edwards.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. It looks like we have managed to keep to time despite all the various issues. I just wanted to say that Chris, when she read at the beginning, there was a poem about her remembrance of her father and also of her mother. And then when Kate read, she read quite a few poems about her relationship with her daughter. And just now Glyn's reading and references to his relationship with his son. And I think those parent-child influences really came across in today's readings, and there was such a warmth and depth of feeling and emotion connected with those. And there was this sort of theme of ghosts a little bit as well. And isn't it odd how these things, you don't know that they're going to happen. And we often say this at poetry events, that there's kind of links between the different readings. Thank you for being such a lovely, warm and attentive audience. It's just been such a treat to be amongst people and poets in this kind of environment. And again, thank you to everybody who's contributed today, our technicians, and of course to Kathy and John for hosting in this wonderful place. All the very best to you, and thank you very much. Let's give our poets a round of applause, please. I hope there'll be more of these events, and if you're interested, please look out for information on the Mid Wales Arts Centre website. And I think we've now got to make way for a music event, and if you're staying for that, please do. If you hadn't planned to, it starts at 4 o'clock and should be a very entertaining evening. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.